It is the 11 Dubcast, and oh my gosh, so much NFL draft drama to talk about. We're so excited.
Who are you and who am I?
I'm Johnny.
And what? Who am I? Who am I, Johnny?
You're the happiest man on the planet. That's who you are.
You'll
George
address me by my official title, which
Nostradamus.
is Draft Master George.
Draft Master George. Okay, I guess we'll go with that. We'll talk about that in a second. The NFL draft was this past weekend, the 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
That's right.
And yes, right. It just feels like an eternity. I don't know.
It feels like it should be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but
it kind of does feel like that. But alas, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 14 Ohio State Buckeyes were drafted. Should have been 16, but somebody did not.
So as much of a draft master as I claim to be, you were actually correct, Johnny, that Ohio State did fall short of tying the record, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I was hopeful, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I was hopeful through the first 4 rounds because some of these guys who I expected to be 6th, 7th round draft picks ended up going way earlier than I expected. And I was like, oh well, hell, maybe they got a shot at this, and then it kind of fell off after that. But we'll talk about that. Let's break it down just real quick.
Yeah, before we get into that, I need to do a quick acknowledgement of our audience, our Dubcast.
Oh, please do. Yes.
Last week, I committed an error. I am, the one that usually does the most of the production and scheduling for the show, and my fingers slipped while I was scheduling the audio version of the show on Monday night. And instead of having the show go out at the usual time, which is, as I've explained before, if you just wait for the article to post on 11 Warriors, you're getting it at 2:50 in the afternoon. But if you're jonesing for your Dubcast fix, you can usually get it at 2 o'clock, either if you're subscribed through the RSS feeds through various channels, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, or if you're subscribed to the 11 Warriors channel on YouTube, you'll get it at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays.
Right.
But I screwed up, and instead of scheduling it for a later date when I was publishing the show, I accidentally published the show right then and there on Tuesday night at 12:30.
Look, sometimes you got to give people a little present. In the off
season.
So
10 minutes after that happened, I said, I want to go see if there's been any downloads at this time where I've accidentally published the show at 30 minutes past midnight on a Tuesday night. And sure enough, 2 people were listening to the show at 15 minutes to 1 a.m. in the morning on a Tuesday night. I know we have a very international audience, so that could have been somebody in another country that just happened to be, in the middle of the day or something. But
you know what, though?
I need to give my props to whoever those 2 loyal listeners were that were listening to the show at what was effectively 1 a.m. for us on the East Coast.
I like to believe.
Big props to you. Thank you.
I like to believe that there's some third shifters out there for whom Johnny and George are their best companions in the wee hours of the morning. So I hope that's the case.
I know a lot of people listen to us on the road, which I can sympathize with in terms of needing to kill time while driving.
Yeah, understandable.
I hope I make that a little bit less of a chore for you.
Props to those 2 duders who decided to immediately listen to the Dubcast
or dudettes.
Or dudette. Let's be realistic. So let's talk a little bit about Ohio State's NFL draft picks. I've got a few questions for you, Mr. George. But quick rundown: Emeka Egbuka, first round, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, pick 19. 24, Donovan Jackson to the Minnesota Vikings. Tyleik Williams went 28th to the Detroit Lions. Josh Simmons to the Kansas City Chiefs with the last pick of the first round.
I would have never guessed I was waiting out an airport delay with a future first round pick.
I know, right? Hell yeah. 3 second rounders, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, were 36 and 38s respectfully. Judkins went to the Browns. Henderson went to the Patriots. JT Tuimoloau went to the Colts. Cody Simon in the 4th round, three fourth round picks. Cody Simon, Lathan Ransom, Jack Sawyer, Cardinals, Panthers, Steelers. We'll talk about the Steelers in a second. Hence your hat. 3 more 5th round picks. Ty Hamilton to the Rams at 148. Jordan Hancock to the Buffalo Bills at 170. Denzel Burke. Oh my gosh. Big hit on that dude. 174 to the
Hancock
Arizona
before
Cardinals.
Burke was shocking. I get it, but it was shocking.
Man, if somebody had told me that would have been the case like 2 or 3 years ago, that I don't know that I would have believed that. And then
you told me that after the first Oregon game, I would have believed it.
Well, yeah, but that's that's what led to that kind of thing happening. And then finally, Will Howard rounds it out at 185 to the Steelers. So you've got 14 Ohio State players drafted, one short of tying the record. That's a lot of players. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, so obviously, this constitutes, a huge, amount of the offensive and defensive talent for the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes. But for you, George, I want to talk about you. You're wearing the Steelers hat. How do you feel with Sawyer and Will Howard now on the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I'm ecstatic. I've said it before. The Steelers take care of their Buckeyes, at least
Absolutely.
The ones not named Justin Fields. So
yeah, right.
So I also talked about how I would have much rather had JT than Jack Sawyer if I was an NFL team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many other franchises would be equipped to get the most out of Jack Sawyer, just because he is a little bit of a tweener in terms of, being not quite big enough to be a consistent upfront defensive line presence, not quite having the agility, or is it lithe, L-I-T-H-E,
yeah,
litheness, if you will, to be a consistent NFL linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, he's not.
He's going to be
fast,
an edge. Yeah, he's going to be an edge guy. But because the Steelers run a 3-4, and because they take care of their Buckeyes, and because they are a franchise that has had consistent production out of players in those positions for many, many years now, and they have developed players that have been drafted in similar areas to where Sawyer did, thrive in those roles year over year.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's one of, if not the best situations Sawyer could have gotten drafted into to maximize his ceiling in the NFL. So
Cam Hayward seemed pretty happy about it, right?
Yeah, right. So even taking the fact that I am a Steelers fan out of the equation,
mm-hmm.
solely for the purpose of being happy for Sawyer having a fruitful outlook for his NFL career, I don't think there's many better places he could have ended up. So I'm very happy for him from that perspective.
Okay.
But I was very, very transparent that I wanted them to get Will Howard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, and for a minute there, what did I say last week? I said Howard should be going before Shedeur Sanders. And if Mr. Sanders' last name wasn't Sanders, he wouldn't be projected to be a top 5 pick. And we got plenty to talk about on that.
We will definitely talk about Shedeur
later
Sanders
in the show.
Yes, we will.
But I feel very vindicated, given the way things out, that those two guys ended up getting drafted on the same day. And frankly, it was only one round removed from where Howard ended up going, even though, and we talked about last week how with a lot of those guys that were in the back half, projected to be in the back half of that group of picks for Ohio State, you had a lot of variance in terms of guys being projected to go in the 3rd round all the way into the 7th.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah.
A lot of those guys ended up going earlier than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Howard was one of the few guys that fell further back than where a lot of people expect. John Gruden openly asked, I don't know how this guy isn't QB1 in this draft.
Yeah.
And I thought that there were going to be more teams that looked favorably upon Will Howard to where he would have been taken further up the board. I don't think anybody would have guessed that Dylan Gabriel would have gone ahead of Will Howard, frankly.
Well, and it's funny
I'm
because
thrilled they got him in the 6th round, though. They played it perfectly in terms of waiting until to get him at the perfect
time. And I think the Steelers did a great job at getting the guy, at the place where they could maximize his value and get all the other picks and things like that. The interesting thing about Will Howard vis-a-vis Dylan Gabriel is that, to me, you could look at both of those guys and say this is the ultimate example of the NFL thinking about intangibles, production, future projections, all this other crap over college production, right? And like Will Howard was the most accurate passer in college football, right? In the 2024 season, right?
Yeah, he had to be up there for sure.
No, he literally he had the highest completion percentage of any quarterback. He, was throwing just deadly accurate balls all throughout the playoffs. He looked incredible. Dylan Gabriel has played more games at quarterback than anybody in college football history. And yet, because he's 5'2" and because Will Howard, has certain quote unquote athletic deficiencies where his arm maybe isn't as strong as some of these other guys, they're projecting them not to have the same kind of value. And to me, what shows how inconsistent this whole thing is. I
gotta ask you, did a quarterback below 6 feet tall shove you into a locker in high school or something? You hate any quarterback that isn't at least.
So here's the deal.
60 inches or 72 inches in height.
I just think,
whatever 6 times 12
maybe
is.
it's me going I don't think a quarterback should be shorter than me. Maybe that's my own bias coming into play.
You're reasonably tall.
Yeah, but my point is
an inch
that
or two taller than me.
Yeah, but my point is that it feels so random where the perception of these guys will be oh, well, this guy, he's so athletic and we'll make sure that he gets coached up and he's got all the potential in the world. And then you'll see another guy who has some of those same athletic intangibles or things like that. And they're but we didn't see what we wanted to see. It's just, you see whatever you want to see in the draft.
Well, in fairness, it was the Browns that drafted Dylan Gabriel. So we don't know what they saw in him to begin with.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So I'm a Bengals fan. Bengals had a pretty, draft to begin with, right? It was a wet fart in a paper bag. They drafted a guy out of Texas A&M in the first round who I think has 3.5 sacks in the last 2 seasons. So great job, guys. I'm glad the 2 scouting, guys that you have on the draft beat are actually doing their job.
They found their Trey Hendrickson replacement.
Yeah, great. But with the Browns, so not only, Quinshon Judkins, I thought was a decent, draft pick for them. I think he's a guy who kind of fills an area of need for them in terms of attitude and style and all that kind of stuff.
And the trade that allowed them to draft Judkins too. There's a lot of Browns fans that aren't happy with that trade. Frankly, I think they absolutely heisted the Jags.
No,
I'm not nearly as high on Travis Hunter as everybody else is.
I'm not either,
frankly. But for the Jags to give up that much draft capital, a second round pick, and their first rounder next year to move up a whopping 3 spots so that you can get a guy who is a part-timer at a position that you drafted somebody in the first round to play last year who had a pretty good rookie season. That just does not track to me.
And the Browns
even
end
if
up
Travis
getting the
Hunter
best.
is rookie of the year, it doesn't make sense to me. I thought the Browns absolutely killed the Jags on that trade.
And they end up getting the best defensive tackle in the draft. So not a bad start to the draft for them, but then they go ahead and they draft 2 quarterbacks that, and again, I guess we'll talk about the Shedeur Sanders thing and everything, but they got they got two guys that they're just going to get clowned.
Well, they had to get some high character individuals into that room, you know.
Yeah, I'm really curious if you're a Browns fan within the reach of our voice. I'm curious what your guys' take on the draft, because it felt like it was so bipolar. Like, I thought they started out super strong. I have a lot of coworkers who are Browns fans, and one in particular that I work really closely with, and he was just like, they were talking about all the different drafts moves that they were trying to do ahead of time, and he, nothing was specific yet, right? Because it was all speculation before the draft. But he just told me, he was like, "Man, I hate this team." He's like, "I'm so tired of this crap," and I'm like, "I get it.
I love it."
Yeah. So
like
anyway,
Stewie Griffin when he's lapping up Meg's tears, and your anguish sustains me.
That's right.
Oh yes, I love it.
All right, so
polar opposites for the Steelers and the Browns fan bases in this draft, especially if you're an Ohio State guy. Oh, yeah. 100%. So that was so. I have to pull back the curtain for a moment. We love Ramsey to death, but Ramsey was so ready for the Browns to draft Will Howard in the 3rd round. He was talking about doing.
Ramsey falls back on the Bears.
What's the sad cast show he does with DJ Burns or whatever about the Browns? Or like, if they draft Howard, we're gonna have to do an emergency 3 a.m. episode. We're so ready to do it. They're riding high with how this draft has been going because they got Judkins already on the same day, and then they throw everybody a curveball and they draft the Munchkin out of Oregon.
Well, the one team that had to draft Shedeur Sanders did. I mean, that was the thing. Like, the one team that really, like, who will take on this circus? And then, the Cleveland Browns bravely stepped forward and said, yes, we will do this stupid thing.
They learned nothing from the Draft Day movie. even they drafted Manziel a month after that movie came out, where the moral of the story was, hey, Cleveland, do not draft a douchebag quarterback.
Don't do the dumb thing. How about that?
And 12 years later, they're just falling back into the same habits, even when they've already drafted another quarterback 2 rounds earlier at the same
Chef's
draft.
Kiss.
It's beautiful. So beautiful. I'm so happy for them.
It's pretty great. Real quick, let's talk about Ohio State's NFL draft picks. I got a couple questions for you. So real quick, best fits. So of the guys who got drafted, who do you think is really going to make an impact on the teams that they got drafted by?
I mean, in terms of, I already talked about like how great I think Sawyer is for what the Steelers maximizing him.
Agree.
But I'm very, very happy with where Igbuka is going. Because Baker obviously was like one of the best success stories at quarterback last year in the NFL. He's not going to have to be the number 1 guy right away because they still have Mike Evans. And he's kind of he's going to be in a good situation either way relative to what happens with Chris Godwin. Because if Godwin is still okay, that only takes more expectation off of Igbuka, and he can kind of slowly assimilate his way into either a wide receiver 3 or slowly overtaking the wide receiver 2 role.
I heard
if Godwin isn't there, then he's just ready to jump into a wide receiver 2 role for a very productive passing offense right away.
I heard some people saying like, oh, well, Emeka's great, but like they've already got 2 other wide receivers who are kind of in the same mold. I'm like, yeah, but they're injured / old. Like this is perfect.
Well, they have another guy they drafted in the 3rd round last year, Jalen McMillan, who came on strong towards the end of the season. So Igbuka is going to have to compete with that guy, but you draft a receiver in the 1st round. I mean,
yeah. I think I agree with you. I think it's a really good spot for him. He's super talented. Obviously, he will be able to work his way and kind of learn from some really great wide receivers. I think it's a good position. I agree. I thought Tyleik Williams at Detroit Lions was a really, really good spot for him.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that.
Yeah, that's another situation where you don't have to be the star right away, but you can fit within the system and just be really successful kind of within your own game. And a lot of it is you're not being expected to be a savior right away. You can learn a little bit. And I think for the guys who are going to be most successful, those are the kind of positions that they're at. Even Josh Simmons, right? Like coming off of an injury, Kansas City said straight up as soon as he was drafted, like, we know what the deal is here, but we love the guy and we're excited to have him. And we don't expect him to be like, our starting tackle right away. We're going to get him up to speed. And like, that's perfect for those dudes, particularly in the first round. Again, like I thought Judkins with the Browns is a really good fit because they won another guy in the Nick Chubb mold. I think that works for him. I think that's kind of stuff he'll be expected to be. I think Travion Henderson in New England is really good. They need a guy who's kind of a home run hitter, and they'll get that with him. So I don't know. I think in the early rounds,
I like Travion on the Patriots more than Judkins on the Browns.
Well, I mean, yes, in large part because it's the Browns versus the Patriots,
That's
and I think
exactly
Vrabel,
right.
Yeah, I think Vrabel kind of knows what he's doing a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. I think those are. I think for especially the guys in the first couple rounds, there's a lot of potential for those guys to kind of shine and not have to worry about the kind of ridiculous expectations that might be.
The other one that I think is good, Hancock is on the Bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, he can be a corner number 3 for them right away. I feel like he could just pick up right where he left off in terms of his role at Ohio State and not really have to worry about playing outside as much. I think he could be productive in what's already one of the best defensive units in the league very quickly for them.
Was there anybody that you thought slid like a little too much? I mean, Will Howard, I would agree. Probably, I think he should have gone higher than that. Some of the other guys, other quarterbacks that were picked before him, I don't think are going to do jack in the NFL. I was surprised by that he went as low as 185 in the 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that Burke fell as much as he did. I kind of get it. I mean, when I somewhat sarcastically referred to him, after that Oregon game, I don't know if it was even sarcastic, honestly. It might have been more sour grapes in that moment. But I mean, I, at various points during the last year and during his career at Ohio State, kind of alluded to him being Sean Wade 2.0 in terms of this guy that was very highly heralded as a freshman, gradually losing more and more draft stock as his career went on at Ohio State. And he rebounded a bit, I think, this season, but still ultimately, I think if after his freshman year, you had been told that he was going to end up being a 5th round pick and that he wouldn't even be the first defensive back drafted for Ohio State when he comes out, I think, frankly, that would have shocked a lot of people. Yeah. I think he could have gone higher. I still think Howard probably fell more than anybody else, but that's solely among the players that actually got drafted. I mean, in terms of the players that fell all the way out of the draft, those are the ones that I feel, mainly Seth McLaughlin. That's the guy that I feel like, frankly, deserved to be picked. And I'm not just saying it because him getting injured cost Ohio State tying the overall record. I mean, I feel terrible for the guy that a practice injury cost him the opportunity to hear his name called. That sucks.
It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, maybe because it's a practice injury versus a game injury. I think that's such a stupid distinction. But like,
I kind of get it. But it shouldn't matter logically, but it's a bit irrational. But at the same time, it happening in practice and you not being able to actually see what happened, I can see how that would make it's the fear of the unknown.
Sure.
So it's not totally far-fetched. I understand where it comes from.
I wonder what his draft evaluation would have been had he just played out the entire season and not gotten injured. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he would have been a 1st round draft pick, but he definitely wouldn't have been some fringe guy in the 5th or 6th round, right? Like, I feel like he would have been a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. And to me, it just seems odd that, Josh Simmons will still end up he still ends up being a 1st round draft pick despite the injury, Whereas another guy who also has an injury, who was a Remington Award winner,
I mean,
doesn't get
that was the
drafted at
point
all.
I was going to make is I wonder how many players that have won the Remington Award have been undrafted
Yeah.
after that happens.
I mean, that's pretty wild. Like, I don't know. It's just, it seems odd to me. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is guys who went higher than you would have expected. Cody Simon, for me, I was watching
easily number one.
I mean, Tyreek Williams, I was excited got in the first round, but I would have expected him to be in the second round easy. Cody Simon, I wasn't even sure would get drafted. Like, I thought he was going to be 6th, 7th round.
I thought he'd get drafted. I didn't think he would get drafted before Lathan Ransom.
Or Jack Sawyer. Like, yeah, I was surprised by that.
Of that group, I expected Sawyer probably to fall the most, and but good for him that he ended up going in the 4th round. But yeah, Cody Simon going I don't know what number he was specific. He was probably number 8, I would guess, because he was the first guy after JT, and they had 3 guys right in round 2.
Yeah,
they had nobody in round 3. He was the first name on day 4, so he would have been number 8. I mean, so he was still technically in the back 7 guys, but I still would have expected him to be one of the last 4 players drafted. So for him to go 8 instead of like 11 or 12, that frankly shocked me a lot.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. Lathan, honestly, like, I think some people
where I expected.
Well, see, that's the thing, because I think his draft stock was put at lower, and so he went a little bit higher than he was projected to go. But I honestly, I think that's a good spot for him. I think 4th round, it makes sense. I mean, he was lights out in the playoff. He played incredibly well in the last part of the season. And frankly, he played great the entire season. He was excellent. But it's, the game of expectations versus, production and all this kind of stuff. It's just interesting to me how that all plays out. Because then, again, not to say that I think Lathan's any better than Caleb Downs, because I don't think that's the case, but Caleb Downs is going to be the first or second guy taken next season.
We'll see. He's supposedly, in the way too early mocks, he's number 1 overall, but we have an entire year before then for, TMZ, SBN to run a slander campaign on him, because he's no longer at Alabama, and then he ends up dipping outside the top 5.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't go to a camp or something, and then people question his integrity or some dumb BS. So just interesting stuff going on, and like I said, the Browns crazy. Here he's gonna draft, but that's the segue to Shedeur Sanders, who Mel Kiper decided to just spend 3 days losing his mind about him not getting drafted. Kiper had him at 5th, I guess, 5th best available.
I think Kiper had him number 2 overall.
Oh my God. All right. So there you go. And so instead of getting drafted number 2, Shedeur Sanders fell, and many quarterbacks were taken before him until he finally got picked up in the 5th round, I guess. It was in the 5th round by the Cleveland Browns. And the thing about all of that, people were very watching this with glee, right? Because of all the things associated with, Deion Sanders and, just people getting kind of their comeuppance a little bit. To me, I really just enjoyed how increasingly unhinged Mel Kiper was getting about it during the entire weekend.
There were a lot
just
of
increasingly angry every time the Steelers, decided not to take a big, flyer on or whatever.
I mean, there's a lot of things to say about this, to unpack, but specifically relative to that, what I thought was very funny, because you asked me to open the show last week what I thought about the overall production of the draft, and I said, the first 2 rounds are okay, but day 3, I'll never really watch day 3 because it just goes so much more quickly, and there's so many names I don't even recognize. It's what's really the point?
Right.
And then, of course, this was the first draft where I've ever watched all 3 days. But there was a lot of compelling stuff happening, and it was very entertaining to watch ESPN squirm while Sanders took the dive that he did, because for much of the first 2 days, Sanders sliding every time that a team that supposedly was going to take him, like the Raiders or the Browns or the Steelers, when those three specifically kept passing on him, they couldn't get their minds off of it. They were like, what is happening here? For all the reasons that were not, while they were dreading what was happening, everybody else was appreciating it. And ESPN did this whole, I mean, they were a big part of the reason why Shedeur Sanders, after the end of the season prior to this most recent one, opened as the betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy and to be the first overall pick in the draft, is because of this ridiculous PR campaign that they did on behalf of Shedeur that ended up carrying no water. Then the day 3 draft coverage starts, and I'm really not exaggerating. It was all they could talk about while the slide was happening the first 2 days. They had to eat so much crow, and they knew it, for everything that had happened in those last 48 hours and all the positives that they had, all the reinforcement they did for that guy, even before the draft and before this most recent season. On day 3, they did not bring up Sanders once before he actually got drafted. They took the ostrich approach, where they said, we're just going to put our head in the sand and hope this guy doesn't become Mr. Irrelevant or worse. And when he finally does actually get drafted, then we will unleash the 20-minute long segment that we had planned to do for this guy. And then we'll let Kuiper, finally vent on whatever frustrations that he had.
Yeah,
it was very, very amusing to me to watch them get their just desserts for how they handled this.
I did like the tweet where it was like, just remember that the news media that's trying to convince you that, Shedeur Sanders should be a top 5 pick is the same group of people who try to convince you that, Colorado was a top 15 team, right? Like, this is, it's people who are so beholden to a narrative, and we talk about being prisoners of the moment and things like that in sports. And, as far as Mel Kiper goes, I mean, we talked about all this a little bit before we started recording. I mean, it's really his one time of year for anyone to care about Mel Kiper whatsoever. And
he's not an NFL analyst; he's an NFL draft analyst.
Exactly.
So
and when it didn't go the way he said it was, not only does his credibility take a shot, but it almost feels like he feels that it's stupid they're not listening to him, if that makes sense. That these teams are dumb for not seeing what I have been seeing and telling people that
the tantrum that he threw, where he somehow thought he was having an argument with Reese Davis and Lewis Riddick, and they had to try to explain to him, we're not arguing with you, bro. We understand why you're upset. And he just kept yelling across.
We're not arguing with you. We just want you to shut up.
Elite comedy. Just incredible.
It was pretty great.
Everybody's saying like Kuiper's got to go. Absolutely not. I want that guy. I want that guy needs to be put in a Futurama style head jar and on every draft for the rest of eternity.
It's much better when
he's moments like that one.
Exactly. It's much better when he's just increasingly wrong. That's way more entertaining than him like actually knowing what he's talking about. Absolutely.
I actually want them to clone Mel Kiper Jr. and I want just a desk of 5 Mel Kiper Jr.'s all arguing with each other during. That's the only draft coverage I need.
All more bird-like than the last. It's like it's like multiplicity. It's like multiplicity, but like really more, like way more annoying. That would be perfect. I would love that. And the last one is actually just like a bald eagle.
It's just an actual like ostrich.
It's just picking at people's eyes.
That puts their head in the sand when their guy they projected to go second overall doesn't go until pick like 156.
Exactly. And it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
But I think the bigger thing, other than the egg on face of the so-called draft experts in all of this, is I was never really one of these people that got super into hating on the Sanders family of Colorado.
Yeah, I mean,
I was always much more hating of ESPN for propping them up for the same reason that like it's something that I have honestly factored into making projections for UFC fighters about, is that you have to take into account that, you know, there's a vested interest for the promotion in some guys to do well because they inherently have more star power
yeah,
than the competition does, and that drives ratings for
they want
them.
clicks. Yeah, exactly
Right.
right.
So that, to your point about them propping Colorado up as like a top 15 team going into the last season, that explains it. But it's hard to be mad at, you know, Sanders, any member of the Sanders family,
Any
for being in
coach
that
would take
position.
that publicity, though. That's the thing. Like, it's not
Right.
unique to Deion Sanders.
Right.
That would be the case if it were anybody who were getting that kind of attention, especially a program like Colorado, right? Which literally was the worst college football program a couple seasons ago.
Right. I'm much more upset with the people doing the propping up as opposed to the people that are actually getting propped up.
I agree.
But I think a lot of people lose sight of that and just choose to be upset at the people that are the benefactor of that decision making just because it isn't righteous, which isn't quite, that's not why you should be mad at them. But there's another side to that kind of works in with where that emotion is sitting. And that's really what started to come to light for me here in this draft, and why I was enjoying seeing Sanders from a personal standpoint take a fall, because there was I think the reason that so many people reacted so like in lacking of empathy, most guys when they take a fall like this, there's still a degree of, oh, he's just a kid and I feel bad.
Oh, sure.
for
Yeah,
him.
of course. Yeah.
That was not present here.
No, people were gleeful about it.
There were some people that were claiming like, oh, there's something else going on here for various reasons that I don't think carry water. But the big thing here of why I think the large majority of people were so glad to see this thing with Sanders blow up in that family's faces. There's a video of Deion, Coach Prime, holding a team meeting at Colorado in which he is reading out messages and emails that he has received from the professors at the university relative to how seriously the players on the football team, not all, but some of the players on the football team, are treating their classes. And the message that Deion Sanders gives to those people, the teammates of his children, is effectively, some of you are going to have to come to terms with the fact that you are not going to be playing professional football.
Right.
And if you do not have a future in professional football, can you really afford to be behaving like this and just transparently disrespecting the people that are trying to give you an education so you can actually do something after your playing career is done? Then it comes out during the draft that supposedly one of the reasons, I don't know if this has been actually verified yet or not, but this was reported from a legitimate journalist, is that apparently in at least one of the meetings that Sanders took with coaches during the draft process, he answered a FaceTime call. And instead of ending the call or telling the person he'd call him back or whatever, he just continued to participate in the call in the middle of the meeting in a setting that pretty much everybody recognizes as basically a job interview.
Yeah, right.
If any other individual did that in a job interview setting, it would be immediate grounds for dismissal. And the average well-adjusted individual knows not to do something like that in a job interview setting.
Right.
The fact that Sanders felt that comfortable doing that speaks to an unbelievable level of entitlement that makes what his father did in terms of delivering that message to his teammates about respecting their professors and their superiors completely hypocritical and fall
Oh,
on
sure.
deaf ears.
Yeah, and I think in general that's how people feel about, any kind of player or athlete or coach or whatever that gets propped up beyond, what they've kind of earned. Let me put it this way. It'd be one thing if Shedeur Sanders was a Heisman winning quarterback and guided Colorado to the college football playoff and they want to, that'd be one thing, but they didn't do that. I mean, they weren't a bad team, but they weren't like some great team or anything like that. And he was fine, but the attention that they were given because of their last name, I think, is something that bothers a lot of people and rubs them the wrong way.
No,
And that leads
and
them.
it's very rare in I nepotism. As I've become older, it has dawned on me how prevalent it is
Oh
in
my God,
corporate America,
it's
but
ridiculous.
in no place greater than in sports. And it's something that frankly had been an obstacle for me for a long time in terms of actually getting to work in sports, and
Sure.
something that
Yeah.
I had to overcome in terms of opportunities, not even like opportunities that I felt I should have gotten, not being made available to me. And I'm not an individual alone in terms of feeling that. There are so many other people that can sympathize with having to deal with that experience,
Of course.
whether or not they've tried to work in sports or have just tried to get ahead in their professional lives in general. And it's
Right.
very rare that the benefactors of that kind of nepotism ever feel the karmic sting that they should
That's right.
from not actually
Well,
being qualified to achieve that level of
and
success. So
then
this was a very rare
right.
opportunity for somebody in that position that was a benefit of being the product of their parent to get to where they were, like primarily to get to where they were at,
Yeah.
getting their comeuppance and their just desserts. And that's why I think so many people reacted with
Oh yeah.
such negativity to what was happening to Deion
Well,
Sanders. But you
and
know what? Karma's a bitch. You absolutely deserved it.
And the thing is, like, Shedeur Sanders isn't a bad player. I think he will be a good player, but I don't think he's going to be an all pro. I don't
I
think
think he'll
he's
be a Cleveland Brown quarterback.
I think he'll be a Cleveland Brown quarterback. And that's the thing. Like, it's wild for someone like Mel Kiper to get so worked up about it. Cause like either you fully like ingested the Kool-Aid, right? And you truly believe that this guy is like, one of the best players in the entire draft, and blah, blah, blah. Or you're just really carrying, like we've used that phrase a lot in this podcast, but you're really carrying water for, people who don't necessarily deserve it. So it was an interesting thing that kind of worked its way out. But we'll talk a little bit. I got one more guy we got to talk about with the draft. We'll do that after we do Ask Us Anything, this, our Dry Goods promo. And I do want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the Dry Goods store at 11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff, including our Rose Bowl shirt, or Rose Bowl adjacent shirt, I guess I should say. The one that says it was 34-0 in the second quarter, which I really enjoyed quite a bit. That's courtesy of Ramsey. And then we also have the Lone Star Heist, which is a diagram of Jack Sawyer's amazing scoop and score. So check those out. They're pretty kick-ass. Let's do Ask Us Anything before we get into the other part of the draft briefly. We want to remind you that you can ask us literally anything by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com. Or in the case of this first question, you're sitting in the room right next to me. So let's say this is a question from Courtney G. You know what? That's too obvious. Let's do C. Ginter. How about that? Let's do that. So the question is there any value to watching every night of the draft versus just watching a recap later? LOL.
In case you haven't picked up on it, this is just Johnny's wife making
What?
fun of me for what I did with my weekend.
No. Well, here's the deal. First of all, I watched quite a bit of the draft myself, so I am certainly not immune from this. Most of the time, I would 100% agree that there is zero benefit to sitting down and watching and consuming what is like literally almost, God, 20 hours of content. Like,
I don't know about that, but it's at least 12 hours.
It's 12 to 15 hours, right?
Over 3 days.
Because it's from 8 o'clock. It's basically from 8 o'clock to like 11 o'clock on
the
Thursday.
first 2 days are both about 4 hours each.
Okay,
and then
so
the last day is about like 6 hours.
They start
12 to 14
Yeah,
hours,
you're right. You're right. Okay,
say.
yeah, 12 to 4. Okay, you're right. You're right. Because they start at noon.
I just did it.
But my point is that most years, absolutely not. No chance in hell. There's no reason to sit through it now,
unless your team is in a situation like Ohio State's was, where you're thinking about 15 players getting drafted, and then on top of it, some historic slide happens that merits your attention for that long to see how far is this actually going to go. It's not worth it.
And that
it was just a happy coincidence this year for me.
Agree. I absolutely agree. And even in a year with Ohio State, okay, maybe 10 guys get drafted. Just wait for the alert to pop up on your phone to tell you where these guys are going.
If you're expecting like 3 to 4 players going in the draft, there's no way it's worth it to watch for that long just to see where they end up.
Absolutely
not.
But
I'm not going to do what I did this year again, probably ever.
Yeah.
But it was worth it this year.
It was definitely worth it.
I enjoyed every moment of it.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. All right. I feel like I just got a carrier pigeon just landed on my No, he landed on your desk from Chaz. I think Chaz just wrote in.
Oh yes, he did.
Chaz has a question. Chaz with 2 Z's.
Yeah, he did. CHAZZ.
Yeah.
Says, "Sup, my Dubcast brethren. Just wanted to know
Chaz.
with the release of the Oblivion remaster this week,
right?
And everybody going so crazy about it, I just want to know, what is your go-to Elder Scrolls build?"
All right, so I'm not a stealth archer like all you dumb lame babies who do the same stupid thing every run. I am a warrior mage, and that means that I got one hand casting fireball spells and the other hand hitting people with an axe. And that's
I could never
full
figure out
offense.
How to get the most out of that.
It's just you're just spamming crap constantly. That's the best part.
I feel like you're kind of doing that regardless of what you end up playing as.
That's true. You know? Anytime you're doing any kind of anytime you're doing Elder Scrolls game, that's basically. But you cast, the way you do it is before you enter into an obvious battle, like combat situation, which could be at any time. But when you're in a dungeon or when you're in a cave or some BS, you cast like stone flesh or whatever on yourself, and then you just say, hell yeah, let's roll, and then you just start throwing fireballs everywhere, and anything that gets close to you gets an axe to the head, and it's sick. I love playing like that. It's fun as hell, and especially if you like max out basically all your offensive stuff, whatever, man, go for broke. I love doing that. I did that in a version of that essentially in Fallout 4, where I just went straight unarmed.
Oh my god!
Punched everybody.
Playing those games unarmed is incredible.
It rules.
It rules. It's the best way to do it.
100%. 100%.
Fallout specifically. I haven't tried it with Skyrim yet, but I know some people that have.
It's still pretty funny in Skyrim.
Done that.
I mean, you're punching bears to death. It's pretty great.
See, I never got Oblivion quite figured out, or not Oblivion. I never battle mage. Because it just felt inherently contradictory to me in the sense that I wouldn't be able to do, like, if you're doing mage, you're needing to keep range so that you're not getting, sliced up by melee people. Right. But if you're using a sword, you need to be in range to do that and take advantage of that. So it felt like, I need to be at one consistent range in order to get the most out of my character and do the right complementary skills. So battle mage was never it for me. Everybody does stealth archer in Skyrim. I've heard in the new Oblivion remaster, it's easier to do that before than it was in vanilla Oblivion. So, I mean, I can't knock anybody for wanting to do that. It's the style that everybody likes to do. I think that for just getting your feet wet in a game before you actually know where all the good stuff is and how to, get around and what spells are actually available and stuff, it's good to just do like a straight up warrior build,
Oh,
shield
sure,
and
yeah.
sword thing, which I
The
just got the
classic.
Oblivion remaster this week, and that's how I'm just kind of getting my feet wet. Because I'm one of these people I was 18 when Skyrim came out, so I obviously was very exposed to Skyrim, but I missed Oblivion because it was a mature game that came out when I was in fourth grade, and I had
Mhm.
very overbearing parents relative to technology and parental controls. So I was never going to even come close to sniffing that. So I'm enjoying it now that I'm an adult and am on my own terms in terms of content exposure. But the pure mage, I think, is the most fun of all.
It's
Like, in
a good
terms of the
time. It's a
ways
good
that you
time.
can blend spells together and
Right.
build yourself up to break the game, I always enjoyed, like, as much of a grind as it could be, it was so liberating to get to enchanting 100 in Skyrim and put those four pieces of clothing together that take 25% off of your spell casting cost for one class.
Mhm.
And then when you've got four that do that together, it's not like 25% of 25%. It's 25 plus 25. So if
Right,
you're
right,
wearing
right.
four, you get 100% off. And then you're basically just casting as much stuff as
Yeah,
you
right.
want for free.
Right.
And when you get to enchanting 100, you get to put two enchantments on one item, so you can do that with two different classes. I mean, you can just totally break the game in a way
So
that no other class permits you to do.
that's
it's
true.
it's so awesome.
I will
I love
say,
it so much.
okay, well, so if you decide to do this at some point in Oblivion, what I will, and again, I haven't played much Oblivion at all, but I assume it the way they tweaked it, it'll probably be roughly like Skyrim. The thing about the battle mage stuff is that you're not trying to do a lot, right? You focus on two or three spells, really, like offensive casting type spells, and you just like get really, really, really freaking
Well,
good
the
at that.
big difference that I notice already, there's a few different key differences, but one big one I notice is that I don't know if this is true for offensive spells because I haven't used one yet, but in Skyrim, you got to equip the spell if you want
Yeah,
to
it's like
use it
in
in
your
one of your
hand. Yeah,
hands.
yeah.
In Oblivion, you could be holding a shield and a sword, and you still have a healing spell that, without putting away any gear, you
Right,
can
right,
just
right,
use it. And that
right.
that if I was a battle mage and I didn't have to constantly be flipping between gear and
Hmm.
palming stuff to use, I mean, that would be a lot more. I mean, that takes away so much time that you spend
That's
flipping
true.
between stuff that it makes it way more
That's
immersive, where
fair.
I'd be more exposed to doing it. But
Well, Chaz, I hope that that helps you out, and gives you a little bit more background. So that's Ask Us Anything. Keep asking those questions. We'll keep answering them. Real quick, just last thing. Quinn Ewers also was in the draft. Uh, people,
barely.
people forgot he went in the seventh round to the Dolphins, which is actually a pretty good spot for him. But another wild drop that
He wasn't happy about it.
he wasn't happy about it. People expected that more than what happened with Shedeur Sanders, but I think that was kind of insane that like a guy that had so much hype coming out of high
Yeah,
school
compared to
and
Mahomes
yeah,
when he
and coming out
committed
of
to
Ohio
Ohio
State.
State.
He was in, I mean, yeah, it was pretty unbelievable. I don't think he's that bad. I don't, I understand
I
the
don't
deficiency
either.
in his game. Um, but compared to some of the dudes who got taken before him, I think he's better than
He
Gabriel.
absolutely does not deserve to fall behind freaking Graham Mertz and Curtis
God,
Rourke.
I forgot about that. Yeah, Graham Mertz got drafted before him. The
Two
guy
Big
from
Ten
Wisconsin who
quarterbacks
went to
that weren't
Florida
Will
and was
Howard.
terrible at both. Like, give me a
When they
break.
announced Graham Mertz at Green Bay, he got booed by the Wisconsin fans in attendance. That said it all.
No, Quinn Ewers is 100% better than Graham Mertz. He's better than Curtis Rourke. That's so stupid.
It's
And again,
unbelievable.
that's where the narrative stuff comes into play, where people just overanalyze some of this stuff. And I'm like, no, Quinn Ewers is not perfect. Like he gets lost in the sauce sometimes. He takes sacks he shouldn't take. I get all that. He's still like, his arm talent is better than any of those dudes.
It's
He's
not like
better
he had
than
it's not like he had a bad game against Ohio State in the
no,
playoff.
no, he didn't. I don't know. I just think people overthink this crap. Now, do I think he should have been like, a 4th round pick? No. But yeah, that to me, I thought was really ridiculous.
Well, speaking of narratives, Ryan Day just got a really, really beautiful one that he can use to recruit
of
for
course
the rest of his career now, because
That's right.
not only did Will Howard go
Yeah.
before Quinn Ewers, but so did Kyle McCord.
Right.
And those are 2 guys that were just 1-season projects under Ryan Day. And so Ryan Day not only now can say, I've had 2 quarterbacks that I worked with for multiple seasons that both ended up becoming top 15 picks. In one case, one guy ended up going number 2 overall. But now I also have one guy who spent a year in my system and left, and then went and set his new conference's single season passing record. Was basically the best quarterback that had ever come through that school for one season. He was basically Syracuse's Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah.
Is what Kyle McCord turned into.
Absolutely.
And then
that's a great comparison, honestly.
And then he's also got Will Howard, who came in for one season, who the big narrative before the season was the guy couldn't throw further than 15 yards down the field. Yeah. I don't even know what Howard, if he was getting any sort of draft hype before he came to Ohio State. And both of those guys, with one season under Ryan Day, built up their draft stock higher than a guy that had committed to Ohio State when he was getting compared to Patrick Mahomes, left Ohio State after taking one snap in a Buckeye uniform, and did enough damage to his stock over the course of his career at Texas, away from Ryan Day, where he went after those 2 guys that only spent a year under Ryan Day.
And
if you are a quarterback in that room at Ohio State, after what has just happened, you have to think long and hard about, is it really worth it for me to leave this system given what has just happened here? And that's something that I think Ryan Day is going to be able to hold over the head of not only the people that are in that room, but the people that are thinking about coming to Ohio State out of high school or from the transfer portal going forward for the rest of the time that he's in Columbus. This was an enormous win in turn of events for Ryan Day in this draft. And I don't think that can be overstated.
And that's what I was going to say, because when you pointed that out in Slack, I was like, that's an excellent point. Because
when I pointed it out back in January before Ohio State even played Texas.
That's right.
I see these things before anybody else.
But you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think, you're crazy if Ryan Day isn't telling recruits, like, look, guys, I'll get you to the NFL. Like, that's how this works. And not only that, but you have a better chance of getting to where you want to go with me than piecing out early. So yeah, it's definitely a great advertisement for Ohio State, as is 14 guys getting selected in the draft, particularly when, 7 of them go in the first 2 rounds. That's a big honking deal.
Oh yeah.
4 guys in the first round. That's legit stuff. And recruits notice that. I think sometimes people kind of poo-poo that and go, what do people pay attention? That's what they care about. That's what they want to see. And that just sets up Ohio State for success in the future. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see, how that impacts recruiting and things like that going in the future. But yeah, pretty successful draft for all involved, except for, the Browns and the Bengals, but that's pretty par for the course. So, you do what you do what you got to do to get to the end, I guess. So we'll be back next week. We'll talk about all the stuff related to the draft, some of the after effects, other things going on, the transfer portal and all that good stuff. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next week.
Take care, folks.